we now proceed to the third part of our series on the executive department. Again, this video is not intended for the regular lecture. This is a review of what is taken in the in-person class that we have in campus. So we have the next power of the president, which is a crucial one, the power of commander-in-chief. Section 18, Article 7 says that the president shall be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Philippines. His powers include the power to call out armed forces whenever it's necessary to prevent or suppress lawless violence, invasion, or rebellion, to suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus or place the Philippines or any part thereof under martial law for a period of not exceeding 60 days in case of invasion or rebellion and when public safety requires it. So, we may have certain apprehensions on the exercise of the president of his commander-in-chief powers because of the sad history we had during the Marcos era, the dictatorship that lasted for 2 decades. No? But according to Father Bernas, the martial law or the commander-in-chief powers that we have right now may be seen as a totally different from the one that you find under the 73 Constitution because of the different safeguards that the Constitution has against the abuses of the commander-in-chief powers. The members of the Constitutional Commission very much were aware of those facts, went about reformulating the commander-in-chief powers with a view of dismantling what has been constructed during the authoritarian years. So definitely, um, safety nets are in place to prevent such abuses. No? So under the 35 and 73 Constitution, um, the power of martial law and the suspension of the privilege of the writ were exclusively with the president. He has full control over such powers. Unlike right now, we have safety nets because the Constitution diluted the prerogative by allowing the court and Congress to participate once the commander-in-chief powers have been activated. Okay, so first is that there is a period of prescription. The original period of martial law and the suspension of the privilege is only good for 60 days unless subsequently extended. But the original period is limited. It's only for 60 days. Even the power of extending it is also restricted. No, again, that's part of the safety net we'll discuss in a short while. But the original period is only 60 days. So it has a built-in limited number of days for the enforcement and the effect of martial law or the suspension of the privilege. Secondly, within 48 hours from the proclamation or suspension, the president may submit or shall submit his report in person or in writing in Congress. Um, this report shall be part of the documentary basis for the assessment of Congress of the the declaration or proclamation or suspension, because also parallel to this, Congress will cast its vote when they are not convening. They should convene. No? For that, um, we have the discussion in thorough manner, no, in the previous video. But Congress voting by a majority of the joint votes, no, in a joint session, may revoke such proclamation or suspension, and the revocation shall not be set aside by the president. Fourth, the Congress may also extend, ito yung kasama nung first safety net, no? The original period is 60 days, but it may be extended upon the initiative of the president. You also have require the voting of the Congress for this extension of the original period of 60 days. Fifth, again, you have the Supreme Court's participation. because the Supreme Court may review in an appropriate proceeding filed by any citizen. Any citizen has a standing for this to determine the sufficiency of the factual basis for the proclamation or suspension. So, if you look at the dilution, yung mahalaga ang tingnan na really the other branches of government has participation, especially the court. If you look at the court under the old constitutions prior to the 87, the court only has the power of judicial review. But right now, the court can already you read this case, no? Petition for habeas corpus of Lansang, no? Right now, the court has that automatic assumption of authority of the case to determine the factual basis of martial law, although passive siya, but has to wait for a complainant, no? A petitioner, could be any citizen, no? So then you have this sixth safety net, that state of martial law does not supplant the functioning of the civil courts, nor authorize the conferment of jurisdiction on military courts and agencies over civilians, where civil courts are able to function. So then you have also the calling out powers of the president as the commander-in-chief. May call out such armed forces to prevent or suppress lawless violence, invasion, and rebellion. This is intended to suppress disorder, and the discretion is by the president alone, no? IBP versus Zamora. This case of Panfilo Lacson versus Executive Secretary or Secretary on the matter of the declaration of the President of the State of Rebellion. This declaration of the State of Rebellion has no bearing on the Commander-in-Chief powers of the President, but it's only stating the obvious or a particular state without adding to her powers. So again, going back to the Commander-in-Chief powers of suspension or proclamation, study the common grounds. Common grounds for the suspension of the privilege or the proclamation of martial law is the actual invasion or rebellion, and public safety requires it. Limitations, you have already discussed it from previous slides. On the matter of the suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, remember that what a writ of habeas corpus is. This is best understood in your remedial law, but it's an order from the court commanding the detaining officer to inform the court that is the person in custody and the basis for the detention of the person. The purpose is to determine whether the particular person is legally held. So what are the implications? This only applies, the suspension of the privilege of the writ only applies in cases of rebellion or offenses directly or inherently related to invasion. Anyone arrested during the suspension must be charged within 3 days, and the right to bail shall not be impaired during the suspension. So tingnan mo yung second na implication, 3 days lang, must be charged within 3 days. But look at the anti-terror law, by the way. It extends to a period longer than that. So that's yung isang pinanghahawakan ng mga oppositors ng anti-terror law. Anyway, the proclamation of martial law has the following effects. The president can legislate and order the arrest of those who obstruct the war effort. But during martial law, the following cannot be done. So martial law does not suspend the operation of the Constitution, because martial law comes from the Constitution. Suspending it is as if suspending the very source of the power. Cannot supplant the functioning of the civil courts and legislative assemblies. Cannot confer upon military courts and agencies authority over civilians, and does not automatically suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus. So when the martial law is proclaimed, the habeas corpus must be separately be suspended. So how is the martial law suspended or lifted? By the president himself, by revocation of Congress, nullification by the Supreme Court, or at the expiry of the 60-day period. By the way, when president declares martial law, there is no need for a congressional ratification, because when the president declares it, it is as good as it is. It is already effective. Only what Congress and the court does is not to ratify, but to review the basis for martial law. It's propriety of issuance. But already when it is when martial law is proclaimed, it is already valid. It's already good. No, Congress does not have a need to concur before it takes effect. Okay. What's the role of the court? Again, review. Okay. So again, distinguish the role of the court with the role of Congress in this case of Alagman versus Medialdea. Take note of this. Going to the most recent martial law, Proclamation 216, declared the state of martial law, the suspension of the privilege of the writ in Mindanao from May 23, 2017. This has to do with the Maute siege, no? So it took effect on July 2017, but sorry, on May 23, 2017, but was extended in July 23, 2017 until December 31 of the same year. Before it expired, it was extended until 2018, December 31, for a period of 1 year. And finally, another year's extension until December 2019. But unfortunately, by the time this was lifted, came COVID. And COVID could have been better managed if they're in Mindanao. Not saying that they did not do it well, but could be a lot easier for Mindanao to have been subjected to more restrictions if there was martial law. But again, COVID was not it's not a reason for at the time for the martial law. It was the Maute siege. Okay. Following the commander-in-chief powers is the principle of the chain of commands, that between a congressional order and the directive of the president, the military should follow the directive of the president because the chain of command must be respected. Okay. There's a principle that civilian authority is above the military. Is this violated when the president declares martial law? No, because as commander-in-chief, he is civilian. So when the president acts as commander-in-chief, he is representing the civilian authority, not acting as a soldier. Okay. In the understanding of the congressional powers together with the commander-in-chief powers, you have to distinguish between the commander-in-chief clause, the declaration of national emergency, and the emergency powers. On screen are the provisions. Distinguishing it from each other, in emergency power, it says that in times of war and national emergency, Congress may grant by law authority to the president to exercise congressional authority to legislate. So emergency powers is when there is war or national emergency, Congress may give the president the power to legislate, like what can be done during pandemics, no? Emergency powers is different from the commander-in-chief powers because emergency powers is a congressional power, is a congressional grant of the president to legislate, while the commander-in-chief powers is the exercise of military powers, though by a civilian, which, by the way, includes lawmaking power. How about declaration of the state of national emergency and emergency powers? In the declaration of a national emergency, there is the power of the president to take over public utility imbued with public interest, while the emergency powers is the power to legislate primarily. Well, by the way, if the president takes over public utility, definitely there's still the need to get legislative authority. Without legislation, the president has no power to take over privately owned public utility or business affected with public interest. The president also has the power. Another power is the power of the president to contract and guarantee foreign loans. In Section 21, Article 7, Section 20, for Section 21 of Article 12, the president may contract or guarantee foreign loans on behalf of the Republic of the Philippines with the prior concurrence of the Monetary Board. And foreign loans may only be incurred in accordance with law and the regulation of the Monetary Authority. The stringent requirements is because of the sad reality that we were indebted to the World Bank during the time of Marcos, and we had definitely no full control, no safety nets as far as foreign debts are concerned during those times. The president also has treaty-making powers. No treaty or international agreement shall be valid unless concurred by at least two-thirds of the members of Congress. Well, you have the impression that it is Congress that's the treaty-making power. No, Congress only concurs. Matters of foreign policy, matters of getting into treaties is executive in character. Okay? But you distinguish treaties with executive agreements. Executive agreements entered into by the president, Congress need not concur. Treaties are formal documents. Executive agreements don't need the participation of Congress. And treaties, executive agreements only set out the details of treaties. So again, it's the president who has the power to ratify treaties or international agreements, can even refuse to submit it to Congress. But Congress will not have be given the chance to concur with it. It does not take effect anyway, because the concurrence of Congress through the Senate is important before the treaty can take effect. Pangilinan versus Cayetano gives us an explanation of what prevails in case of conflict between a statute and a treaty. Try to understand this one. No? This was also taken up in the portion in our discussion in the video on Congress. But definitely, treaty prevails because of the rigidity of the process of, statute prevails because of the rigidity of the process of getting into or coming up with the statute. Because while a treaty primarily is an act of the president, only Congress concurs. Statute is more or less participative by both the executive and the legislative branch. Imagine the three separate readings on the 3 separate days separately by the two houses. And then it's assessed by the president, and so discretion to veto may be overridden by Congress. So that process is more stringent than a treaty. Can the president unilaterally withdraw from a treaty? In the case of Pangilinan versus Cayetano explains it, that the president may not unilaterally withdraw from a treaty when Senate conditionally concurs of the treaty, when it was entered into by the executive department, and when the withdrawal will be contrary to a statute, okay, or when the statute requires concurrence of the withdrawal. But generally, the president can withdraw a treaty if it's unconstitutional or contrary to the provisions of law. Okay, but he may not do so unilaterally and under those conditions earlier mentioned, as projected on the monitor. The president has also the power to deport undesirable aliens, Tech versus Deportation Board, and also read this case of Commissioner versus Shear. The president has the power over with or over and off legislation. The president must address Congress at the opening of its regular session, helps in the preparation of the budget. No? President shall submit to the Congress within 30 days from the opening of every regular session as the basis for the general appropriations bill, a budget of expenditures. President has the power to veto. Okay. Also has the power to do item veto, no, for appropriations, revenue, or tariff bills. The president can exercise emergency powers if granted by Congress. President can fix tariff rates as granted by Congress also. And this one, among his powers and privileges, is his immunity from suit. While the presidential immunity from suit is not mentioned in the 87 Constitution, unlike in the 73 Constitution, there actually is no need for it to be written in the Constitution, because that is a part of general principles of accepted norms in the office of the president. No, settled is a doctrine that the president during his tenure or actual incumbency may not be sued without his consent. This is to provide him from being exposed to lawsuits that will degrade the dignity of his office, and he must be free from any form of harassment or hindrance from the performance of his office. And finally, because unlike Congress, with 24 senators and at least 250 members of the lower house, there's only one president. It only is effective during the actual incumbency of the president. That's why in the case of Estrada versus Desierto, The cases filed against Estrada, which are criminal in character, involving plunder, bribery, and graft and corruption, his immunity does not extend after his tenure. Okay, it will be anomalous to hold that the immunity is an inoculation from liability for unlawful acts and conditions. It's not. Okay. The president enjoys immunity from suit during his tenure of office or actual incumbency. Conversely, this presidential privilege of immunity cannot be invoked for a non-sitting president, even for acts committed during his tenure. Speaking of immunity, if you look at the Rome Statute, um, can the president invoke immunity from suit from the Rome Statute in the International Criminal Court? According to the second paragraph of Article 27, immunities or special procedural rules which may attach to the official capacity of a person, whether under national or international law, shall not bar the court from exercising the jurisdiction over such a person. So no immunity there from suit. Is the vice president immune from suit? It's not. If it's not written for the office of the president, it's also not written for the vice president. But perhaps because if the immunity is with the president alone, maybe by extension, no? By tradition, maybe. But we will have to wait for jurisprudence for that. For the vice president, the same qualifications, terms, and oath, also natural born. But um, um, salaries also does not take effect for the president. No, but the vice president did not take part in the increase of the salary. Will the salary take effect during his term? You try to look into that. That's interesting. Huh? Okay. The same restrictions as to employ in other employment. Um, the, the vice president may be appointed as member of the cabinet, but again, that permissive term may here. It's only permissive. The president may refuse to appoint the vice president as a member of the cabinet. May be removed also by impeachment. His functions is primarily the vice president has the right of succession, his membership in the cabinet. Um, he may also be performing as an acting president, no? And that's it. So thank you for viewing the video.